Hello and welcome. My name is Cindy, and I will be your moderator for tonight. Share Our Strength Through Our No Kid Hungry campaign is excited to be hosting tonight's Youth Town Hall. It is now more imperative than ever that young people have a voice in the democratic process, given the effects of COVID-19 setting back 10 years worth of progress in the childhood hunger rates, and with so much more on the line during this upcoming election. Tonight's town hall is a conversation for young people by young people to help encourage voters and their networks to vote for kids and teens on and leading up to November 3rd. Our panel of speakers will consist of 6 No Kid Hungry youth ambassadors and advocates who have all been working to end childhood hunger in their own communities, answer the questions of why they vote, why it's important to vote, and how their efforts and experiences working in these communities informs their decision to vote. Students have also had the opportunity to submit questions ahead of tonight's town hall. And while the next hour is going to be a conversation around voting, it will not be a discussion surrounding any candidates in the upcoming election. Our main focus will always be on voting for kids and teens and making childhood hunger a priority for the upcoming administration. At this time, I'm now going to have our youth ambassadors share a brief introduction about themselves.
Hi, my name is Emma, and I'm a senior social work student at the University of Arkansas, originally from Houston, Texas. This summer, I served as a No Kid Hungry youth ambassador with the Low Country Food Bank in Charleston, South Carolina. There, I help prepare and distribute fresh meals to children in the 11 coastal counties.
Hi, my name is Allie. I recently graduated from Baldwin Wallace University in Berea, Ohio with my Bachelor's of Science in Public Health. This summer, I served as a youth ambassador at Children's Hunger Alliance out of Columbus, Ohio, staffing mobile and stationary meal sites all around the county to ensure the kids had continued access to food during the pandemic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arsh. I'm a neuroscience major at Michigan State University. This summer, I served at Gleaner's Food Bank in Detroit, Michigan, serving in the mobile food distributions, and I'm excited to be with you all today.
Hi, my name is Shelby. I'm a junior at George Washington University studying international development, and this past summer, I worked with No Kid Hungry and Feeding Kentucky to support summer meal programs.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby. I'm a senior at Marquette University and I am a 2-term youth ambassador with No Kid Hungry and the Hunger Task Force of Milwaukee. This summer I focused more on building bridges between language barriers between government aid and Spanish-speaking communities, specifically in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Rathburn, and I am in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm a senior at Colorado State University, and this summer I worked on working with our summer food service program around Larimer County and getting to know the kids around here and making the summer meals fun.
So we are so jazzed and thrilled to have this esteemed panel of youth ambassadors and advocates. And we're going to dive into the first question tonight. And kicking off our town hall will be, are you voting in this upcoming election? And why is it important to vote?
Hi again, it's Emma. I am voting in this election cycle. I actually had the opportunity to come home and vote early and in person. I think that it's really important for young people to vote to create meaningful change around causes that they're passionate about. I think voting as a right is important to create these change in communities from your local to your federal arenas. And without the youth vote, there might be areas that are forgotten or placed as a priority.
Hi, so yes, I am voting in this election. In fact, I dropped off my absentee ballot about 2 hours ago, so I guess I have officially voted. Young people have been a driving force behind every major social and/or political change our country has seen. Even with childhood hunger, young people are a huge force behind this movement. It's important for young people to vote because just imagine what would happen if we took that drive from other social issues and put it behind using our voice through our vote.
Yeah, I think it's so important for young people to vote, and just like everyone else is saying, young people are the main backbone behind so many social movements and everything, and we are voting for our futures today, and so I think that we need to consider that when going to the polls.
Like everyone's been saying, yeah, I think voting, especially for young people, is extremely crucial. This is my first time actually voting in this election, so super excited about that. I have to still drop off my absentee ballot, but definitely excited to be doing that. And I just think it's extremely important because I feel like young people kind of have like the GPS and the map of where the country will be going in the future. And that being said, the one thing that we can control right now is engaging in a civic way, voting and things like that. So I think this election is so crucial because it will sort of serve as the GPS for what our country will look like going forward. And voting is the one way that we can have an impact. Everyone can have an impact together.
Along with what everyone else is saying, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm also voting in this year's election, and I think it's important for the youth and young people to vote because this is how our voices are heard, and this is how we let society not silence our voices and realize that there is social and political changes that need to happen, and we're going to be the voice of that. And it's going to be something that is definitely needed, especially with this upcoming election. So I think it's very important to be able to voice our opinions and be able to let society know what we think should be changed.
I agree with everything that's been said before me. I sent in my absentee ballot about 2 weeks ago, so pretty early in. With everything that's going on right now, from hunger issues to COVID, it's just so important that I feel like I have a say and I've exercised my right to participate in these elections and like what comes next.
Amazing. Thank you so much to our ambassadors for those thoughtful answers and those call to actions. The next question that I wanted to ask is, what impact did you see while working in under-resourced communities this summer?
I would say that the biggest impact that I saw over the course of my work this summer was just realizing how many kids rely on school or summer camps for food. All of that was thrown off course. Some of it didn't even happen at all or was completely canceled due to COVID. And so we saw a huge influx of school-age kids coming to us for food daily. We saw the same kids showing up every day because they had previously relied on a summer camp that wasn't operating this summer. Currently, I serve as a city year member as part of AmeriCorps in an under-resourced high school, and we're still seeing those same issues of access that while we're not in schools, wondering how kids are getting access to nutritious food.
I also saw a huge impact in under-resourced communities, especially in Latino or Hispanic communities. Specifically in my area in Wisconsin, there is a huge population of Latinos or only Spanish-speaking communities that didn't have access to resources or didn't know that they were eligible for resources. So a huge thing that I saw was being able to build bridges between language barriers that were in these communities. For example, Pandemic EBT was a huge government resource that really wasn't advocated for those in the Latino community or didn't really know what was going on. So what I did and I loved doing with the Hunger Task Force was translating and getting a lot of resources out there. This is still something that's struggling and still something that I see very prominent in under-resourced communities, is just having documents and resources in multiple languages, which hopefully we can see a huge gap in the future or hopefully close that gap in the future.
With my work this summer, I was mostly remote, but when I did get to go on site visits, one of the places I was able to participate in their program was in a rural community. And the primary challenge for them was actually just the physical distribution of food. And the biggest impact I saw was funding, which went directly towards a bus, which was used to provide on-the-go meals for students who weren't able to make it to the school where they were passing out food. In rural communities especially, there has been a lot of devastation from the impact of COVID-19, especially agricultural communities. So in this way, I was able to see a really big change for those who traditionally go without direct access to food.
Yeah, and I even see some of these impacts carrying over today into the fall. Working as a youth ambassador again this fall, I'm seeing what schools have stepped up to the plate and like what, superintendents and things like that we're voting for that are stepping up to the plate to help kids and schools who are under-resourced and understaffed, to provide meals. And so I think voting is really important and, helping lessen this impact of hunger around these communities.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I think you painted a really illuminating and stark picture of what communities across the United States looks like in the aftermath of COVID-19. And so that kind of leads into the next question of how has your experience working in these communities impacted how you're going to be using your voice and your vote in this upcoming election?
The experience to see what community really meant and how I could impact it and how to use my voice and get out the vote. Using my personal testimony and resources that No Kid Hungry has, including the longest summer report, I can talk to friends, family, strangers about the importance of making sure our youth remains fed. And I've really made an effort to challenge myself to have more difficult conversations about childhood hunger and look to my elected reps and make sure our youth remains fed.
I would say, just to add on to that, the biggest thing that I learned from this summer that I plan on carrying forward is the idea of persistent action. I think this summer was one where everyone at Gleaners Food Bank came together along with the bigger No Kid Hungry family for just a bigger cause. And I think I saw the impact that just 10 or 15 people at a mobile food distribution can have on hundreds, if not thousands of people a day. So in my mind, if that's what the impact of just a few people can be, I kind of think to myself, if everyone votes, if everyone holds elected officials accountable and things like that, what can we accomplish long term? What can we accomplish on an even bigger scale? So that was the biggest thing I saw this summer is collectively groups of people coming together to serve the underserved and just give everyone a voice and a platform to advocate for themselves and for underserved communities.
I think that now I will be paying more attention to who I'm voting for and how they have supported children through this time and how they've supported children in the past. There were many instances this summer where I was reaching out to my elected officials and asking them to support kids, specifically around SNAP and things like that. And so just seeing how they're voting and how they're really supporting kids is really going to be one of my main ticket issues.
Awesome. Thanks again for sharing about individually how you plan to use your voice and your vote. But the next question comes from Evelyn in Delaware, who asks, collectively, how do we turn childhood hunger into a movement? And can voting be a part of that movement?
Yeah, well, I think that this is a really important question because you were trying to connect the issue of voting and political participation to another issue, hunger, which we care so much about. And childhood hunger, like anything else, can be addressed through policy. It can be improved through policy. So voting is one of the simplest ways that we can make a difference in that policy if you do the research on which candidate has a beneficial platform for this issue. And if none of the candidates have released a platform for this issue, your political participation could just take the form of reaching out and asking them. And that's part of why especially down ballot races are so important in the voting process, because you're not just voting for president, you're also voting for things like city council or your state representative, all of whom have a hand in childhood hunger. So the best way for every person to take part in this movement and make it larger and larger is to directly vote and ask your representatives about childhood hunger and what they're going to do.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Shelby was saying. We can also turn this into a movement because no child should need to wonder when their next meal is going to come. It's so essential for growth and brain development and the child's well-being. Voting can be a huge part in what will be done for certain candidates and what they are addressing, if they are addressing the problem and actually acknowledging that this is something that should be acknowledged and should be talked about, especially when it comes to funding certain programs, or if a candidate is acknowledging what is going on and bringing light to childhood hunger. This is definitely something that is important and is taking part in voting, because we are able to see what is going on and address these issues because we are in the public and seeing this firsthand and wholeheartedly. Since we have personal experience with what is going on, it's essential that we take that into consideration when voting, and definitely acknowledging that there are changes that need to be done, and we are in charge of doing so.
Yeah, I think Abby and Shelby really covered that well. The only thing I would add is that this summer I saw a lot of how government and policies are really, really entrenched in the whole childhood hunger arena. So during the mobile food distributions, we would have to write down and document different food items. And coming to the summer, I guess I didn't really think of the complexities of how that worked and things like that. So just from my experience with dealing with how the bigger government organizations are actually involved in the childhood hunger space, that stands to reason that things like voting and civic participation and holding elected officials accountable, like I said earlier, all of that can really help enact change on a policy level, given the fact that the childhood hunger space is so, the government is so involved in everything that goes on with food distributions and such.
Thank you again. And on a similar vein, Ramya from Iowa, who sits on the Student Leadership Committee for the National Association of Secondary School Principals, asks, can legislation help create a lasting solution to end childhood hunger? And tying it back to our theme of voting, how can voting be a part of that?
I think that legislation has to be part of ending childhood hunger. Nonprofit and non-governmental organization support is essential and so vital to the work that we do to uplift like our on-the-ground community work. But structural change through policy is essential for real, lasting progress and growth. Voting puts elected officials into office that have the power to write and approve legislation. So whether this is for better policy directed at addressing childhood hunger, or even passing bills to fund and expand current support programs that are already running, legislation is an answer to so many questions around childhood hunger and challenges, rather than just Band-Aid fix after Band-Aid fix.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what Ali just said, yeah, so many things like funding and elected officials and who's writing the policies, what you're all voting for. But also what I would want to add is that, that policy does more to end hunger than you would even know. I learned this summer that policy has a huge influence on like how food banks are even funded and nonprofits all around the country. So I just think even if you think it's not a government organization, it could be tied to legislation, and voting really helps make sure that legislation is helping those who need it.
And so with this upcoming election in November, some of you have already cast your ballots absentee or voted early in person. But for those of you who haven't voted yet or have thought about voting in the past, have you felt any barriers or challenges to voting as a young person?
As a young person, especially as a college student attending a college out of my home state and where I vote, some things can get kind of complicated with, knowing when you have to register if it's your first time, where do you have to request a mail-in ballot, where can you vote if you're going in person. A lot of my roommates are actually out of state as well, so they're having those same complications. But something that I really suggest is for them to reach out to their county clerk office, and they can get some validation from that.
Very similarly, I do go to school outside of state. I'm originally from Illinois, so being in Wisconsin definitely was a little tricky, and navigating which state to vote in and how to do so. Again, reaching out to your fellow clergy people to be able to figure out which is best for you to do, as well as just the societal image. I feel like there is a lot of stigmas and stereotypes towards young people when it comes to politics. They love to just assume that, oh, well, you're young and you don't know what you're talking about, or going similarly off of that to thinking that although we're young and we don't know what is actually happening, when it is completely the opposite. We know what's going on in the political world, and we realize that there are issues that need to be addressed and need to be talked about, and that is why it is so essential for the youth to be able to state their voices and be able to state their opinions and exactly what is going on and vote.
So I am also a college student voting out of state, and because there are so many different electoral processes in each state, you do have to start early and look and see what the absentee ballot process is for you. It's more difficult for some people than others, unfortunately. So that's the primary barrier. But second to that, there's kind of a more mental barrier to voting sometimes among young people, and that's cynicism. Sometimes it feels like voting doesn't matter, especially for presidential elections where you might be from a state that's like particularly one color or another. You feel like you're not really exercising a voice. But just to reiterate an earlier point, it's so important for you to vote down ballot. I mean, this year I voted in 6 or 7 different elections and constitutional amendments, and there's just so much more that you can participate in than just a presidential election. But I think that people need to firstly remember that their voice does matter, that there is no situation in which their vote isn't going to count, and that all you have to do to make sure it does is look up what kind of processes are going on for your state and for your absentee ballot process, and then go for it.
Yeah, just to add on to what everyone has been saying, I think for me, the biggest barrier is just the access to like high quality, correct, accurate information on how to vote, whether that's absentee ballot, out of state voting, things like that. As someone who will be voting for the first time ever, I just think that's probably the biggest barrier that I faced. I know where I go to school, Michigan State, we have an organization called MSU Vote that does a lot of drives and gives out a lot of flyers and holds a lot of events to educate students on how they can vote, how they can register to vote. So that's been very particularly useful to me. And I think that just kind of shows that students advocating for other students or young people advocating for other young people can be very, very valuable, because hearing the information from other students who are educated on how the voting process works gives me the sort of confidence to go out and vote in the fashion that makes sense for me, kind of.
Another stigma that I think definitely needs to be addressed is a lot of people assume that you're one person, you're young, and your vote doesn't matter, and that is completely the opposite. We need to address what's going on and educate ourselves in the political world and what is happening around us, and our voices do matter, and your opinion and your way of doing so is definitely to vote and make sure that your voice is being heard and not silenced throughout society.
Amazing. So after November 3rd, what happens then? How can you stay engaged, and what ways can young people continue to advocate for issues that they care about, specifically child and hunger, after November 3rd?
So yeah, I will definitely be staying engaged after November 3rd, and I just think I'm gonna be even more engaged than I've ever been before. I'm 23, so I've been voting for a few years now, and I think that I have not done my part as a citizen to be more outspoken and do better about calling everybody that who I elected, and keeping up with the different issues going on in my local community, not just in the national scope. So yeah, and then I encourage others to do that too, because there are so many things that just a simple person calling someone and telling them, this is why I feel you should vote yes on this, or I think we need more funding for this program, can really change an opinion or give some more insight into what their constituents believe. And I think that that's why it's so important.
Yes, going off what Becca said, we have the same brain sometimes. It's a little scary, but I'll be staying engaged after this election, not by only being just educated and knowing that, oh, yes, these issues are going on in my community, but really being more proactive about taking action. I know that's something that I've kind of struggled with in the past of like, oh, you can read as many books and watch as many documentaries as you want, but I know that me as a person, that I need to be more active and actually doing more of that on the groundwork. In addition, no matter who's elected, it's important that we hold our elected officials accountable. Their job is just beginning when they enter office. So young people can get engaged by working at local phone banking or text banking about proposed legislation in their state or local area. You can call the offices of your elected officials. Even something as simple as having those hard conversations with your friends and family can make a huge difference in how you learn to advocate not only for yourself, but for others as well. It's really important to never forget the power that you have as a young person, no matter what way you choose to engage.
Continuing off of that, I will definitely continue to be engaged and participating as much as I can in volunteering and being vocal on social platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, etc. I feel like that's the most millennial way to stay active in what's going on, and also to make sure that my voice is being heard, even if it's just on a local level, as well as keeping other students in the loop about local volunteering opportunities, events, or things that they can do to help end childhood hunger in their community, specifically in my community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm going to always encourage people to volunteer their time or reach out to local governments, such as senators, to voice their opinion on social issues or policies that need to be addressed in their local area. The youth can always stay up to date in what's going on in the political world around them in order to avoid the stigma of ignorance that is implied in younger generations, to be able to stay in the loop about what is going on in the political world as well as in the local. A lot of people just assume that politics is everything going on in the government, but they fail to acknowledge that there's a lot of things happening locally and in our backyards. Another way to stay informed is definitely educating yourself on what is going on in your local government, not only in the government in Washington, D.C. There's a lot happening at a local level that a lot of people fail to acknowledge, and it's definitely something that I will help others educate themselves on, as well as keeping myself informed.
I really just want to echo what everyone has already said, and really just making sure that our elected officials stay accountable for what they promised. And something that's really important to me that I've grown to learn is voting in more than just these big elections. Voting in the primaries and the midterms does make a really big difference in potentially getting children fed. And something that I really want to advocate for in after, and what you can care about, is no matter your age, you have the ability to help end childhood hunger by engaging in your community and volunteering with local nonprofits, keeping up with No Kid Hungry, and seeing what's going on in your own community to help end childhood hunger.
Yeah, I think everyone has summarized it wonderfully. I think the only thing that I would add is, as young people, just trying to keep each other in the loop and trying to have those challenging conversations about political issues, about engagement opportunities, about volunteer opportunities, just keeping each other engaged and holding each other accountable. I think that's a really big thing, is if when you're with your friends, when you're with anyone, your colleagues, your classmates, keeping them in the loop, having those conversations about what it means to participate in the voting process, what it means to advocate for elected officials. Just having conversations with other young people can help spark the movement and get everyone engaged in the process. So that's one way that I plan on staying engaged in the process. And just on a personal level, I think I will continue to try and advocate and work with Gleaners Food Bank, as well as with No Kid Hungry. I think both of the organizations are doing wonderful things, and as many people can get involved as possible, that would be amazing.
Definitely echoing off of what Arsh said, I feel like keeping the youth engaged in what is going on, especially those of older generations too. I feel like a lot of people fail to realize that younger generations do have a voice and need to communicate that with the older generation, even though some of our views may be different. I feel like putting people in a position where they are uncomfortable, especially when talking about politics or situations or policies, is definitely needed in order to spark that conversation, whether it's differing within what you're talking about with another individual. I feel like it's essential to understand multiple viewpoints and have that conversation, as uncomfortable as it might be, with either someone of your same generation, someone younger, someone older. I feel like it's definitely something needed in order to fully educate yourself in what is going on, as well as educate others on multiple opinions on policies, as well as just making sure that everyone knows what's going on, opposed to just implying or referring or relating it to a larger generation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one more thing also. Take your friends to the polls with you. Make a little group date to all walk to the ballot box together, whatever you need to do to get your friends involved. Something my roommates and I always do is we'll make a special like thing out of it. We'll walk to the ballot box, and it's on our campus, so we like walk around campus a little bit, and it's always such a fun time. And I know it just gets your friends to get involved, and it gets you all excited about doing it, and it makes it kind of a cute little friend activity.
Amazing. Our final question tonight, to wrap everything up into a nice bow, is what advice or what do you have to say to young people that can't vote quite yet?
So as I had mentioned in the previous prompt, I guess is the word, there are so many other ways to get involved in political and social processes other than just voting. So you can still call your elected officials, you can still do volunteer work with local organizations around issues that you care about, or just around getting out to vote in general. No Kid Hungry has a ton of awesome, amazing opportunities, especially for young people to get involved, even if you aren't necessarily at voting age yet. Another thing I would add is that stigma around voting starts even before people are eligible to vote. So I know some of my students are like 15, 16, and are already like, oh, my voice doesn't matter. This election doesn't impact me. So really talk to your peers. If you're like, oh man, I'm so excited, I can't wait till I can vote. Use that time to talk to your peers and kind of get them on the same page. Like Becca said about taking your friends to the polls, get that enthusiasm that you have for voting and engaging in politics with your friends as well.
Yeah, so this is so important also. Not everybody can vote, but everybody feels the impact of how people vote. And I think especially people who are under 18 feel that. And, so I think that getting excited about it, really getting an understanding of what is going on in your community and what is going on from how your parents are voting, or how your older friends are voting, or how your siblings are voting, or whatever. And just like connecting the dots about how that's impacting you and how you're going to start voting when you're older. And like Allie just said, find other ways to get involved, like volunteering or community organizing. You don't have to be 18 to do that. And, just finding, I think if there's anything 2020 has taught us, is that young people need to speak up and say how they're feeling, because I feel like so many issues are impacting young people.
Yeah, just to reiterate, basically what we've already heard in this kind of whole event is that it's never too early to start. You can volunteer, and if you're really passionate about certain issues, that's absolutely what you should be doing. You should be going out and getting involved in your community, because that's as much of a direct action as voting, and that's something that you can always do before you turn 18. You're also never too young to actually work on a campaign if you're that passionate about like a single potential elected official. And I think really the most important part is just finding ways to be involved in your community directly and make sure that everybody is on the same page as you when it comes to promoting policy, regardless of whether that means voting.
Another way to definitely help this is to help educate those who are unable to vote and actively listen to the voices of those who cannot vote yet. There are so many opinions and so many ideologies that you can listen to, and definitely actively listen and take that into consideration for those who can vote, as well as volunteering. There is no age gap of when and where you can spend your time to help. If you see that there is something going around in your community that you feel passionate about, you can definitely vote. Sorry, not vote yet, but you can definitely volunteer and give your time to an organization or listen to those who are in underrepresented communities so you can truly understand when you are able to vote about social issues that are going on and how you can make a contribution to that in the future when you are eligible to vote.
Yeah, not to be redundant, I think everyone has spoken very well on the topic. And the only thing I would add is I've seen in my community, there's a lot of internships available for certain campaigns of certain individuals running for local offices. So if you're a young person and you still can't vote, you can still advocate for people that you feel will make a change, whether that's policy, whether that's in local government, and things like that. So you can do that by handing out flyers for a campaign, volunteering with the campaign at different campaigning events in your local city. Those are just a couple ways that you yourself are not voting, but you are increasing the votes for who you want to vote for, what you want to vote for. So there's many opportunities available for people that young people that can't vote yet, and can have just the same amount of impact, in my opinion.
Another point for those who are unable to vote, you definitely still have a voice and can make your voice vocal. As I was saying earlier, there are ways on social media that you could definitely have your voice be heard to the public, whether through social media, through campaigns, or through volunteering, or even just staying educated. I know No Kid Hungry and a bunch of local organizations have everything that you can read or listen to, which has a lot of problems and spectrums across the board that you can listen to and educate yourself on. But definitely using your voice, you still have one, and you're able to broadcast that through use of technology and social media in an even broader span than we ever could in the past. So it's definitely something you should take advantage of.
I want to also encourage and challenge young people to take some extra time you have, maybe to go on Spotify or your favorite podcast network and maybe find a podcast about what interests you and kind of see what makes you passionate, what sets you on fire, what makes you wake up in the morning, and just form that opinion and stay strong to it. And one day you can vote. It might be a little while, but you'll be able to.
I've just run out of adjectives for our youth ambassadors and their answers and responses and them as human beings. They're all amazing, incredible individuals. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time today with our youth ambassadors. They have provided such valuable insights into the voting process and on the topic of childhood hunger. Hopefully, these testimonies, experiences, advice, and calls to actions encourage you and your network to vote for kids and teens in this upcoming election. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you continue to stay engaged with No Kid Hungry and have a great rest of your night.